Today, I'm going to share a paranormal story that happened to me when I was much younger and far less experienced with these phenomena. It was a situation which, in retrospect, I'd say I didn't handle very well. It took time for me to take these bizarre events in stride. It also took me a while to realize that I experience an unusually high frequency of strange occurrences, that is, events which point to the paranormal on some level. And it can be hard to know just how many people experience this kind of phenomenon. From what I've seen, people largely just don't talk about this stuff. You see this especially with the older generations who maybe faced a lot more judgment from those with perhaps a more conservative mindset, and often, especially men in particular, I find have a harder time openly talking about spooky stuff like this. I hope that's changing, though. We're seeing major shifts in attitudes now when it comes to UFO sightings, for example. People aren't so quick to immediately turn up their nose when faced with these kinds of stories. So that's good. That gives me a little bit of hope. People are so afraid of being thought of as unstable or crazy, and I can personally attest, just from running this channel, you make yourself an instant target from those who feel instantly superior to anyone who tries to discuss these topics openly. You're either gullible, stupid, or you're just a liar, or all of the above in many people's eyes. Generally, from those who have no direct experience with these kind of phenomena. So, given our reluctance to discuss these events openly, it's really hard to know for sure how rare non ordinary events really are. But through the course of sharing my experiences over the years, I'm learning that for the most part, most people experience maybe one, maybe two really mind blowing paranormal events in their lifetimes that can't be sufficiently explained. That is, if they ever witness something which defies the limits of our understanding. So, strange things will begin to happen around you when you really begin returning to the source of your own power, which is fully awakened consciousness, which again is just one way to describe these higher states of awareness. The process of awakening seems to stir our world up a bit. It pushes at the boundaries of what we imagined was possible. Ultimately, I see these occurrences as passing phenomena, a side effect of the larger shift in awareness that's taking place. And because of that, these phenomena are not something to be chased after in and of themselves. And you'll run yourself in circles if you try. By that, I mean, don't chase after clairvoyance. Chase after the conditions that allowed that clairvoyance to enter your world to begin with, if that makes sense. Even though we shouldn't get too hung up on these bizarre occurrences along the way, it's also really important that we share these stories with each other. As I've said, I was somewhere around 19 when really strange events began to unfold for me, and I didn't handle a lot of these experiences smoothly at all. I would be sent into a mild panic when I was, for example, faced with the fact that my own consciousness is not strictly bound to the physical body, or when, for the first time, I witnessed some flying object overhead that was breaking the laws of physics right before my eyes. For a lot of us, it's fun and exciting to hear about these stories, but it can be frightening when you're suddenly faced with something undeniable that you cannot find a rational explanation for. But the more I read and listened to the stories of others who had witnessed similar phenomena, it helped me to not just collect myself, knowing this sort of stuff has happened to others, knowing I'm not alone, but hearing other people tell their stories made me feel a bit more confident to find my own voice in this realm. And ultimately, it helped me move on to the next stage, which is okay, now what's really going on here? Why am I experiencing these things? What can I learn from all of this? And that's important. If nothing else, I hope this little channel of mine inspires others to tell their stories after they have pointed a critical eye on the experience. We want the truth. We deserve the truth about the greater possibilities of this world, not someone's fantasy-filled version of the truth. I swear, I wish all the New Age authors who have nothing more to offer than their own personal fantasies would just write fiction. And that's not an insult. I love fiction. I love fantasy. I took my experiences and insights and I created an occult fiction novel off of them. But I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that, tripping the field is a true story on any level. I've discovered that there are indeed some amazing and awfully poorly understood truths to be found in the paranormal and spiritual realms. And if we don't approach these topics with respect and integrity, then what are we really offering to other seekers on this path? You're doing a huge disservice to those who are perhaps starting to tap into these experiences themselves, and they may be a bit afraid, they don't know where to turn, they don't have the experience yet to even know who to trust. They don't know what an experienced person even really looks like in this field. So often they're going to turn to those people who look like the stereotypical guru. As I've said, anyone can put on flowing robes and adorn themselves with beads and crystals and sit on a pile of meditation cushions surrounded by candles. Anyone can do that and spout nonsense. So today I'm offering you just another bizarre story, a true story that happened along this journey back to consciousness. And I'll explain how I ultimately handled all of that, because that's important as well. It's as important as the story. So when I was somewhere around 20 years old, I had just started dating this girl, and we'll call her Sarah. That wasn't her name. I think we had only gone on a couple of dates at this point, and I was really intrigued by her. She was pretty and down to earth, and she was kind of geeky and quirky like myself. I liked her a lot. So she and I found ourselves invited to spend the night at this cabin off the beaten path near a small lake with a few friends of hers. At first, I was a little uneasy about staying the night with a girl I had just met, not to mention we were going to sleep in the same bed together. I'll explain that more later, but regardless, it turned into a great time, actually. We all ended up drinking probably a bit too much and playing a bunch of stupid card games together, and by the end of the night, Sarah had a bit too much to drink. So when she went to bed, she fell asleep pretty quick, like pretty much immediately. Now, there was only one extra bedroom and bed in this cabin, so she and I had agreed ahead of time we were going to sleep in the same bed, but also that nothing was going to happen. And I know a lot of you are going to go, yeah, sure, right. But believe it or not, I really take that seriously. I took that seriously back then, and I take that seriously now. I had to learn early on that I really had to know someone, and I really had to feel a connection with them before I was comfortable being physical with them. It took me a long time to figure that out about myself, how I was wired, and that's not a common narrative we share about how men approach sex in general. Anyway, so Sarah and I were simply going to share a bed with each other. She's had a few drinks, so she falls asleep first. I slept, but I slept pretty lightly. I was in a strange place, a strange but comfortable bed, and I was sharing a bed with someone who was drunk and I didn't really know. In retrospect, now all those details, strangely enough, provided the perfect conditions for a lucid dream. And as I've explained repeatedly in other videos, that's how it works. My body had all the right physical conditions for sleep, but my mind, was just left a bit restless and a little bit awake. So at some point in the middle of the night, I had one of my visions. That's all I knew at that point. By this stage, I'd been entering highly lucid, highly realistic states of consciousness at night for about a year at this point. I had not encountered anything, though, that I had any strong reason to believe was on any level supernatural, though. Nothing that I had observed in these states, as intense and bizarre as they were, gave me any reason to think I had been experiencing anything beyond very unusual dream states taking place in my head. But in this vision, Sarah and I were engaged in intense, passionate lovemaking. Of course, in reality, I know she's fast asleep next to me. Even though I'm immersed in this dream state, I'm also fully coherent and awake mentally. In fact, I can hear her softly breathing next to me while the vision is playing out and it's unfolding. And the vision is as real could be. In these states, I know totally where I am. So I know I fell asleep next to Sarah, and I'm fairly sure this is just another lucid vision and not reality, but it looked and felt so real. We're having sex in the bedroom we were actually in, and on the bed we had actually fallen asleep on. And in the vision, I'm on top of her, and at one point, my left hand is kind of draped over her face. And as my hand slides down, like over her mouth, my fingers are dragging over her lips, and she bites down on my pinky finger. Hard, really hard. Now, those of you who are active dreamers, many of you have felt pain in your dreams before, but this was uncanny. It was sheer agony. It was so real, I felt like she was going to tear my finger off with her teeth. So this wakes me up physically, that is, I'm already awake mentally. The rest of my senses never really fell asleep. But now I'm ripped directly out of this vision and everything is back to normal. I find myself laying in the same position I was when I fell asleep. Sarah is still fast asleep next to me as well. Of course, the first thing I do is I start inspecting my left hand, the one that was just in horrible, searing pain a moment ago. And I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with my fingers at all. I even thought maybe I had some kind of cramp in my fingers, or I was laying on my arm wrong or something, and it cut off circulation to my hand. And my brain just tried to incorporate that stimuli, into a dream. But no, I'm on my back. My arm is fine. There's no sense of discomfort at all in my fingers or my hand. I'm totally fine. So I'm like, okay, that's weird. And I drift off to sleep again. I should say my body fell asleep, but the rest of my conscious self once again did not. And a few minutes later, I enter the exact same lucid vision again. Exact. Sarah and I are having sex. I'm on top of her. She starts biting my finger with so much realistic force and pain that I snap back awake. Same as before, she's still fast asleep next to me, and I'm still laying peacefully on my back. There's no sense of pain in any part of my body. Now, I don't know what to think. What in the hell is happening here? I don't know. Somehow, though, I do finally manage to fall back asleep. And after that, I generally slept normally. It was still a pretty light sleep, though. I woke up later in the morning, and Sarah had already been up, and she was just getting out of the shower. When she sees me, she kind of freezes. For a second, I thought she was kind of startled because I was awake, because she's standing there in front of me in just a bath towel, but she gets this confused look on her face, like something suddenly occurred to her. And she says, a bit shyly, I should add, I have this weird question. Was I biting your finger last night? She asked me. And I could literally feel the blood rush out of my face. Why did she ask me that? How could she be asking me this? So the question floors me. The way my brain was wired in these early stages was that when it was faced with something completely illogical, I would just start panicking. My mind would just start frantically searching for some way to connect all the dots to make all of this fit. And when it couldn't find a way to do that, it would just panic more. So after I pick my jaw up off the floor, the first thing that sort of dribbles out of my mouth is, okay, which finger? And she looks confused by my question. I'm asking her, which finger of mine were you biting? I ask it again, and I'm trying to see how much of our stories matched, really. And she's thinking about it, and she begins to run her own hand over her mouth, just like I did with her in my vision, like she's replaying the event somehow. And she finally says, I was biting your pinky finger. And now she looks confused by what she's saying, and my heart's starting to race even faster. This is too weird. This made no sense. And my entire brain and nervous system is just going, no, that was my dream. I was conscious while it happened. I wasn't like talking in my sleep. Neither of us were. I don't even do that anyway, because the first way my brain is trying to fumble this all together is to, so it makes sense, is that it's trying to reason, well, maybe one of us was mumbling in our sleep about biting my finger or something. Our brains both took that information and ran with it. So now I need to know what she knew, like how much matches here. Why did you ask me that? I'm demanding, and she can't answer for some reason. She's looking even more confused at this point. And after she's processed this for a bit, she finally goes, it's like we were having sex and you were on top of me and I was biting your finger. But from the look on her face, she knows we didn't actually have sex last night. No one was that drunk. In fact, oddly enough, she and I actually never ended up having sex. The relationship didn't even last. Not important. And it didn't break up because of this situation. So as I said, I didn't handle this well. I'm kind of jumping up I grab her by the shoulders and I'm just demanding, well, why are you asking me this? Where is this question coming from? I'm trying to understand how does she have this information in her head? And her face just goes blank. Her towel's starting to fall off and I'm freaking out. I'm acting like a raving lunatic. And she looks up at me with this utterly blank expression and she says, I have no idea why I asked you that. So now I had no idea what to think. I feel like I'm going crazy at this moment. Am I being screwed with here? This girl just walked out of the shower and randomly mentions highly specific details about a vision I had, and then tells me she has no idea where any of these ideas came from, and that was it. I mean, that's all I could ever get out of her, period. We only dated for a couple of months, and ultimately we just didn't get along. We really weren't right for each other, but even weeks after this happened and I calmed down and apologized for freaking out, she still insisted that she had no idea why any of those words came out of her mouth that morning at all. According to her, she was simply left with this vague impression of us having sex, and in an act of unrestrained pleasure, she was biting my pinky finger. And as quickly as the impression took shape, apparently it vanished back into the ether. I've thought this through forwards and backwards. Was there something we were both subjected to that put this idea in both of our heads? Some conversation, some clip of a movie, anything that could have placed this very specific subconscious imagery into both of our heads? There's nothing I could find, and it didn't take long to look because we had only known each other for a few days. There wasn't a lot of shared experiences to sort through at this point. So, what does all this mean? First and foremost, and I know people hate this answer, but it's the only one that I know is 100% true, and that is, I don't know, and that's okay. But whatever I also know, I also know this other stuff, and there's other truths to be found here that I know are also correct, if that makes sense, beyond that I don't know. One of those truths is that placing all of this under pure coincidence is bullshit. If you've watched any of my other talks on these experiences, you know that coincidence is the ultimate answer that always has been offered up as the only rational explanation. And if I had been a witness to only a couple really outlandish experiences like this, I guess I could let that fly. That, by pure coincidence, 1 out of a million combinations of random events happen to play out in just the right way where they merely appeared to be connected. Okay, fine, I can see that happens. But as I've been trying to illustrate here, my life is and continues to be filled with these events. So I don't accept that this girl just had some random synaptic firings that coincidentally matched specific details of a highly intense lucid vision I had twice while we slept next to each other. So, where does that leave me? If something paranormal happened, okay, well then what was that? Did Sarah and I share a vision somehow? Or maybe she had a moment of clairvoyance and she merely saw into my vision? Or maybe it was her dream all along and I'm the one who tapped into her dream, but because she'd been drinking, she could barely remember her dream. Maybe we both tapped into a parallel universe where we ended up having sex that night. We can play those games forever as well. And that's why I said at the beginning of this that I had to learn that I was missing the point if I started chasing after these experiences directly. I now see all of this as a beautiful reminder that there's something bigger at play here. The ultimate truth that all consciousness originates from one source. And even that truth can be viewed as religious or spiritual insight. But again, those are just words. If we were ever to quantify consciousness in terms of, say, a wave or a field of energy, it's also possible that eventually those ideas will be looked at as scientific viewpoints, perhaps. I find that our world does indeed tend to move in a reliable direction. It tends to play by an established set of laws where it operates within certain parameters. But I find that sometimes the larger world operates just like what we observe taking place at the particle level, where we have to approach our environment more so in terms of probabilities as opposed to hard and fast rules. So let these strange occurrences bloom around you while you remain at your center, awake and aware. Don't be afraid to tell your stories. So until next time, peace and love.